Hey, it's Michael Greco in Santa Monica, California. This video is brought to you by ASMP, Wonderful Machine, and TitanCopyright.com. Most artists, especially photographers, worry about their day-to-day business and never look down the road to the day when their work is stolen. Then they often find themselves near powerless because the work was never registered with the US Copyright Office before it was abused by someone else. Copyright registration is the most important thing you can do to protect and keep control of your work. Yes, you own the actual copyright to your work when you create it, but you do not have the full protection of the law unless you register it. As an artist, the side of your business life must be protected. We work too hard on the creative aspect of our businesses not to be able to control who uses our work and if you get paid for that use. Copyright registration is the answer to this issue. All that said, copyright registration can be deceptively complicated, but I'm here today to explain how to do it best. As I said before, you really have to do it. Our wonderful audience will understand why after watching this video today. First, let's understand the need for registration. If you were ripped off without your work being registered with the US Copyright Office, you are only entitled to actual damages, which is the amount the infringer would have paid if you licensed the image to them, or the amount of profits the infringer made from the value of stealing your work. This puts you in a terrible position, because now you have to hire a lawyer, which will more than likely cost you more than you would have earned from the infringement of the license in the first place. Many infringers are counting on you to not have registered your copyright. Some have even built businesses around it. If your work is registered, though, you are now entitled to statutory damages, which are damages that you can be awarded even if the infringer made no money from your work. These damages are often calculated at 3 to 10 times the licensing fee, even if you have never licensed the work before. In addition, a judge can give you your legal fees if you win. In fact, if the act of infringement is considered willful, or the use great enough, a judge can set damages at a maximum of $150,000 per image for willful infringement, plus your legal fees. The limit for non-willful infringement is $30,000 per image. This changes the paradigm greatly. Now you have more control and potential remuneration for your work if it's stolen. I can't say enough how important it is to register your work. I personally have been doing it for over 25 years. That one little piece of paper from the Copyright Office after the shoot will change your life. So the first thing you need to know are the rules and regulations around registration. The US Copyright Office requires you to register published work and unpublished work separately. They also require you to register the work by year. But here's the first thing to be aware of. For unpublished work, the work needs to be registered by the year it was created. Every image has to be created in the same year. For published work, the work needs to be registered and grouped by the year it was published. Every image registered needs to be published in the same year. And recently, the Copyright Office has limited the number of images you can register in one registration to 750. For those of you who shoot a lot, it might make sense to edit your submission. Here's where you need to come up with a scheme that works for you and your workflow. You must also consider this additional rule. The Copyright Office allows you 90 days from the time of first publication to register your published work and receive retroactive protection as if you registered it before the infringement. That means the work is covered even if it's infringed before the registration is received, as long as you register it within 90 days of publication. For both published work after the 90-day grace period and unpublished work, the work has to be registered before it's infringed to be protected. While coming up with a system for your work, you must consider these two factors. Also, many people have asked, what constitutes work being published or unpublished? I'm first going to say I'm not an attorney. This is a subject that vexes even copyright professionals. For purposes of the U.S. Copyright Office, publication can occur when, quote, a copy or multiple copies of the work are distributed to the public for the first time, end quote. The U.S. Copyright Office also notes that publication can occur when copies of the work are offered to a group of persons for, quote, purposes of further distribution or public display, end quote. What does this actually mean? If you put the work on your personal social media account, it is likely unpublished. But if you put it on your website and you are selling the work, it is likely published. Recent guidance has indicated that the idea of, quote, further distribution or public display, end quote, is important. Bottom line, it is safer to assume that once it is on the internet, including social media or your website, it is considered published. You should find an attorney to work with you to make sure your first registration is done properly, and they can answer any legal questions you might have. They can also shed light on the published and unpublished issue for you. After reviewing the first registration, if no changes need to be made, then you should be able to do each successive registration on your own. The attorney has to make sure of things like the ownership of the image. This video assumes the images are copyrightable, meaning they have artistic merit, and that you own them as an individual, meaning you are the copyright holder. For me, I use 3 different scenarios to deal with published and unpublished images. Also, understanding the scenarios will help you understand what is published and what is not. The most literal would be if you can figure out what images were used by the magazine, newspaper, book publisher, advertiser, or website. Those would be published. Maybe they are the images you retouched for the client. Maybe they're being used by a website and you can go through the site to see what they finally used. These images need to be separated from the unpublished images and registered separately from the other images from the shoot. If I can't figure out what was used because the client has disseminated the images to too many places, I consider all the images delivered to the client as published. There is case law to support this. Now remember, you have 90 days to register published images, which means you could theoretically do 4 registrations a year and have everything published, registered, as long as it's under 750 images per registration. If it's not, you have to do multiple registrations per 90 days. The last scenario I've used over the years is to register everything as unpublished before it gets published. This, though, was much easier before there was a 750 image limit and before the web and social media. I would take everything I shot from every shoot in a time period and register it before the first magazine would get published. This is almost impossible today unless you can control the release of your work, as in a special project, a fine art project, or a book. Today, I have been splitting my images up between published and unpublished because they can be published the same day I send them to a client. I have to add, this video is also referring to images published after 1989. There are separate rules for images prior to that date. I know all this sounds complicated and confusing, but once you do it a few times, it will become second nature. Trust me, and you have to do it to secure your future. If need be, watch the video a few times and take notes.